sleeping on the Raiders and has them finishing last in the AFC West, while Nick thinks the upgrades to coach, quarterback, and running back will vault them into the playoffs. Do you share Nick's excitement for the Raiders, or oddly, Bruce's pessimism? That would be weird.
I said it's like a trick SAT question. Of course, I think 3 teams are going to come out of that division, and Brew, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. Just not the Raiders being one of them.
Assuming that you're going to say the Chargers will not be in.
No, I got the Chargers, the Broncos, and of course the Chiefs in.
I'm sorry, Nick. You will say
no. I think the Chargers and the Broncos miss personally. I understand that everyone's getting Bo Nix bust ready for the Hall of Fame, Howie, but because he beat a lot of backup quarterbacks. But I'm not quite the believer. And listen, I don't. Here's my logic, and tell me if you agree. I don't necessarily think the Raiders, on a neutral field, if they played the Chargers 10 times, would win 6 of them. But I think because of the schedule difference, because of different factors, they could have the better season. And I think that your team was at such a deficit at coaching quarterback last year that the defense is going to get better just by the morale boost of having a professional quarterback, a great coach, and that's going to make a defense that's a little undermanned play maybe better than we saw last season. That's my logic.
Well, I do know this from the minute Pete walked in the building, and you guys have been covering sports for a long time, and Pete, and we certainly covered him a lot in Seattle, and love those teams up there, and the one thing that they all had in common was, and it fits kind of the bill now with you pick the running back Genty, and you bring in Mostert, and the offensive line, 2 tight ends. You're going to see a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to run the football. He's openly talked about the team is going to be, if nothing else, a tough physical football team. And I think if you look at the division games, and I know Nick, you've looked at it closely because they see Kansas City twice a year. And Denver twice a year, and obviously the Chargers. And those games a lot of those games are coin flips. And if, like you said, you talk about a culture, you talk about, accountability, you talk about system, you talk about situational football, all of those things, they're going to be significantly better from your lips to God's ears, Nick, if they're in the playoffs. And listen, I'm a Raider. I was fortunate enough to be drafted there. Couldn't imagine playing anywhere else, and love the team. And I hope your optimism is. Sometimes I watch your show a lot, and your mountains, tears, and your some. I laugh, and it's a lot of fun. And you on with it. So I'm glad to hear the Raiders are whether you have a tier or a mountain way up the hill.
It sounds more like your heart talking, Howie, which I understand, than your head. And I'm with you. I'm with you there.
All right, moving on.
I'm going to give you a neighborhood kind of line. I have no knowledge of the aforementioned incident.
Meanwhile, in Dallas, Howie, Micah's got no deal, obviously. Dak says he's confident he'll be on the field for week 1. Schottenheimer saying he'll be on a pitch count. Now, we've been worried about injury potential. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, he's not the full Micah Parsons that we see at his peak. What are your expectations for Micah if he plays in week 1?
Was Dak going like this when he?
He's confident.
I think he was. Well, listen, I don't think Dak is making money decisions there. Particularly, the only money decision is where that check goes on a weekly basis. I think this is kind of the game plan with Dallas and Jerry, and we've seen this movie before. Micah is a generational talent in a position that, I think however you're lining him up, quarterback number 1, left tackle, defensive end, you kind of have your list, and each person might have a different number 2 or number 3 or number 4 position, but his position, he's a positionless player, and he causes quite a bit of a problem for opposing quarterbacks and schemes and offensive lines, etc. I think Aaron Donald did it, and there are certain guys, and I go the Bo Jackson route, and he's not Bo Jackson. I'm not saying he's Bo Jackson. You could lock Bo Jackson in a closet for 6 months. He'd come out and run for 200 yards and not pull a hamstring. I mean, that's how good Bo Jackson was. And I think Aaron Donald falls into that category also. If he plays week 1, and it's a shame because as a player, there's only one way to get ready for football, and that's to play football. It's like fighting. If you're a boxer, you got to box. Right. I mean, you in the ring and start throwing punches and not expect some residual kind of effect in week 2, week 3, week 4. It might be week 5, but on a pitch count for sure. I'm going to throw out another scenario.
Okay.
And this might, I'm not saying this, I have any news on this or anything, but what's the one significant coup that Jimmy Johnson made early on in Dallas?
What, getting Emmett back?
Herschel Walker.
Oh, that's right. I was wondering if that's right. Yeah.
So
really?
I
You
think
think
was
that's
just
possible?
smoke.
I'm saying, those two guys, they're hitched at, they're joined at the hip, and what came first, Jimmy or Jerry, who's more responsible, et cetera, and, you'll get different perspectives on that. I mean, I'm kind of partial myself, but I think Jimmy making that trade was, it kind of was the launching pad for, what turned out to be 3 world championships. Maybe Jerry is thinking, that's a big bang kind of move.
All right. Next step, though, Howie, since you brought it up, where is the ideal landing spot outside of the Raiders? Where would you like to see Micah go? Where do you think he'd have the biggest impact?
Well, where does Joe Burrow play? Where does Patrick play? Where does, Jackson play? Where does, fill in the blank?
Josh Allen.
Those quarterbacks and those offenses, he's a guy that can change the dynamic of a division and possibly the team.
So just to stay here, because we have maybe 90 seconds left. I think people in our position, and you talk about Mahomes Mountain Tears, throw around the word generational a lot. You don't hear it.
People do, and I agree. I agree.
So you don't hear it as often from an actual generational player that's in the Hall of Fame like yourself. So if Micah is, for you, a guy that there'd be no question. You pay him whatever the market is to keep him on your team. He's that level of player.
Here's the problem with Micah and Jerry, and I had a similar situation with Mr. Davis. He didn't want to talk to my representation. It was my last year. I held out in camp, and so I get the call, and it's Howard. This is what I can pay you, and the negotiation. It's essentially the mouse going in to negotiate with the cat, and I'm at a disadvantage, and Micah's at a disadvantage in that room with Jerry. Yeah. And it's not fair to Micah, but it's certainly, from Jerry's perspective, is fair to Jerry.
Okay. The great Howie Long. Howie, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you. Huge game coming up week 2, Super Bowl rematch. We'll see you hopefully out there, maybe. We don't know. Howie, thanks again. We'll see you during the year.
Love the show.
Thank you, Howie. You're the best.
More First Things First after the break.